Dear ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for the opportunity to address the Vienna Economic Forum again this year, and I'm sorry I cannot be with you today. This year's forum comes at a critical moment for Europe and the region. 2 years ago, the COVID-19 pandemic had triggered an unprecedented crisis. During these years, governments were forced to adopt substantial stimulus packages to face socio-economic disruptions and rising debt vulnerabilities. Now, Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine has made matters worse by fueling global inflation, increasing geopolitical fragmentation, and challenging macroeconomic stability, especially in commodity importing countries. In response to the serious inflation, central banks have tightened monetary policy and significantly increased interest rates. As a result, firms and governments who had become used to low interest rates now see their cost of borrowing increasing. All this is happening at a moment in which a structural rise in government spending and investment is underway. Notably, higher expenditure is needed to address the climate change, higher defense costs are needed to meet security concerns, and increased spending is needed to secure adequate care for an aging population. This is creating a dilemma for central banks, because they know exactly that in order to get inflation down to their targets of roughly 2%, they risk tightening too much, causing a recession, provoking high human costs, and triggering political turbulences. The challenges are big, and we should be carefully assessing the options and their implications for citizens and businesses. So what does this new political and economic context mean for EU neighboring countries and the Western Balkans? Let me first refer to the political dimension. The war has brought the EU and its neighboring countries closer together. Just to give you one example, the EU has fully integrated the Western Balkans into its food and energy security initiatives in response to the ongoing war. The region is part of the European Food Security Preparedness and Response Mechanism and has been invited to participate in the EU's joint gas purchases. The changing geopolitical situation has strengthened the EU enlargement and neighbourhood policy. The unequivocal commitment by the June European Council to the EU membership perspective of the Western Balkans was further confirmed with the opening of negotiations with Albania and North Macedonia in July. And finally, on the 12th of October, the Commission recommended that candidate status be granted to Bosnia and Herzegovina. In the meantime, Ukraine and Moldova have been granted candidate status following their application for EU membership, and for Georgia, a recognized European perspective was offered. Let me now turn to businesses. Examining how companies in the Western Balkans performed during the pandemic, we see that firms came out better from the crisis than initially feared. They lost 29% of turnover and 9% of their labor force, but substantial policy support helped to prevent large-scale bankruptcies. However, we also notice that those firms which were more integrated into global value chains were more innovative and digitalized and performed better. So the lesson seems to be clear. For the region to become more resilient and to be able to face the geopolitical challenges, more efforts are needed. Efforts to support digitalization and green transition, improve productivity, and enhance the integration of Western Balkan companies into EU value chains. So how is the EU supporting these efforts? First, we are deepening the level of our relations. In addition to the recent recommendation for the candidate status of Bosnia and Herzegovina, we are accelerating the enlargement process. We have just started the screening of the EU acquis for Albania and North Macedonia, following the opening of negotiations with both countries. We are also preparing an assessment of the acquis for Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia. Second, we are accelerating the implementation of the Economic and Investment Plan for the Western Balkans. A first substantial package was launched in February, endorsing 21 flagship investment projects amounting to 3.2 billion euros, including a substantial 1.1 billion grant component. This economic and investment plan is already helping the region, with its significant support to connectivity and to the competitiveness of the private sector, and by supporting the move towards greener and more digital economies. Lastly, I would like to stress the EU's extensive and continuous support to Ukraine and its people through macro financial assistance and budget support operations, or through our commitment to help with all means the reconstruction of the country. In conclusion, it is clear that strengthening the bonds between the EU and the Western Balkans in this new geopolitical reality is indispensable. But Western Balkan economies must also strengthen and deepen their regional integration to reduce their vulnerability to external shocks. A good example is energy, where the region should increase its effort to integrate its energy markets by improving cross-border interconnections and regional market coupling. To attract investment, the region must rethink existing strategies and further explore new opportunities like nearshoring. I hope this forum today will allow for a fruitful discussion about these challenges and the opportunities ahead of us. Thank you very much for your attention.